Hey, Shavua Tov. I recall a very sainted rabbi who I studied with at Yeshiva University, Rav David Lifshitz, a wonderful person who had been from Europe and escaped through Japan. And when I got there was already an older man with a glorious white beard. And he would begin every year with the same speech about the greeting that Jews give to each other, Shalom Aleichem, with a handshake. And he would explain it doesn't just mean, hey, how you doing, what's up, what's new. Rather, it means something else. It means I wish for you to achieve shleimut, completeness, because the word shalom comes from the same root as shleimut, completeness. And I'm willing to help you. And that's why the shaking of the hand is important. It's a symbolic offer of assistance. That his goal in our year of learning was for him to help us to achieve completeness through our learning and growth spiritually. With that as a background, let's take a look at some of the things in Parshat Hukkat, where we see the power of speech and how speech is supposed to be used. What should we be talking about? And not just speech, but also actions. And we'll go straight away to the most dramatic and sad part of the Parsha, when the people, after Miriam has passed on, they no longer have her well, they have no water, and they're thirsty, and they complain. And God says to Moses to take the staff and go and speak to the rock. And instead of speaking to the rock, Moses hits the rock. And God then says, because you failed to sanctify me, you shall not lead this people into the land of Israel. His path to the Holy Land was now blocked. Now, what exactly did Moses do wrong? He was supposed to speak to the rock, but he spoke to the people. But if that's the case, then why was he told to bring along the staff? What exactly happened over here? So the commentaries, Rambam among them, say that really it wasn't so much the hitting of the rock that was the mistake, but it was what he said to the people. He said to them, Shim'u na hamorim, listen, you rebellious, contrary people. Do you think that I can bring water out of this rock? In other words, he spoke harshly to them. Now, this is the first lesson about speech, because we discussed in last week's Parsha of Korach how there was negativity, there was punishment. Korach rebelled, and there was a miracle. The earth opened up and swallowed Korach. But we noticed that the people did not at that point say, oh, Moses is right, Aaron is right, and we made a mistake. No, the people double down and they say to Moses, you killed the people of God, because there was the earth that swallowed Korach, and also there was the fire that came out and burnt those who had brought incense. So the punishment didn't make people repent, in a sense. It made them just angry, and they complained. So there came a plague. And the plague was saved, but was subdued when Aaron brought incense. But that also didn't get them to stop complaining. The only thing that got them to actually change was when the staves of the 12 representatives of the tribes were put in the tabernacle, and Aaron's staff bloomed and blossomed, gave fruits and flowers. Then the people changed. And what do we see from here? And I quoted Rabbi Pelkowitz of Long Island of blessed memory, who said very profoundly that punishment does not change a person. It simply restrains him. If you wish to change someone, you must have a positive vision. It's not enough to see even the most dramatic of punishments like the earth opening up. There must be something that gives hope for a brighter future, and that was the staffs blossoming and blooming in the tabernacle. And so one could say the same thing here too, that Moses, when he was being critical of the Bnei Israel, he didn't realize that this is a different generation. And to punish them and to rebuke them is not going to change them. They must now be transformed. So when God had told him to speak to the rock, he was teaching Moses to show them a potentially higher way of living. But instead, Moses reacted the way he had 40 years before, when he had to rebuke them and he hit the rock. And maybe he assumed that that's why he was being told to bring his staff along with him. But there's really another reason why he was supposed to have the staff. I remember years ago going to a wonderful activity at a place called Neot Kedumim, where they had a little flock of goats, and the activity was who can get the goats into the pen. And so they would give people a stick and say, okay, you can try. And people would try. They'd go this way. They'd go, come here, here, goaty, 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 whatever. And it was very, very, very humorous to watch. And then the shepherd showed us that we were doing it all wrong. Instead of trying to lead the goats into the pen, you go behind them And then they start walking. And if some little goat goes off to the side, you go and tap on the ground right next to them, and they'll go right back in line and make their way into the pen. And so it was. When the Israelites first left Egypt, they understood the language of the whip, of the staff, of the force. And so Moses had to hit the rock. But now this is a new generation, and it's time for the staff not of the one who is a taskmaster, not of the one who is coming as a disciplinarian, but rather the one who is coming as a shepherd, as a guide, to show them a better way. That's why he had to have the staff, while he spoke to the rock and gave them a positive, uplifting message to transform them, because they were ready to be transformed. This was a new generation. And therefore, God says to him, since you didn't see that opportunity and you didn't sanctify my name by transforming them and giving them that hope and that vision, so then you are not the one who can lead them into the land of Israel, because they're going to have to become independent in Israel. They can't always be with somebody standing over them with a whip or with a staff. That's one example. Then we have another example in the Parsha where we see that speech can be directional. What do I mean? So the people, again, were complaining. They were having negative speech. Negative speech never brings a good result. They were complaining about what Jews complain about, the food, the manna, and all of that. And so they were smitten by serpents, by snakes. Now, the snake, it's directional. The snake spoke to Eve, to Chava, and urged her to do negative things, to eat from the Eitz Hadat, and therefore his punishment was down, to crawl upon the earth. Korach, when he had rebelled against Moses and Aaron, he was also punished by being swallowed up by the earth, because destructive, negative speech brings a person down. What is the solution to this incident where they're complaining about the manna and where the snakes are biting them? God says to Moses, you take a serpent, put it up on a pole high up, and people will look up at it, and then they will be saved. What does that mean? Because when we look up, all of a sudden we are perceiving of opportunity and possibility of hope. It's a positive message. So it is directional to always be looking upwards. After the sin of the spies in Parshat Shlach, so the people were very down. But then we get the mitzvah of tzitzit, fringes, and in the fringes, one of them has to be the color of sky blue. But the rabbis explain why that color, because it's similar to the sea, which is similar to the heaven, which is similar to the divine throne of glory. Why tell me those three things? Just say it's similar to the divine throne of glory, because we want to raise the person's glance from down, which is looking at the negative and complaining and dividing and being an attacker rather than a builder, and to slowly raise their gaze up towards heaven, towards hope, towards positivity. Now we have another incident, which happens right before the snakes incident, which is really fascinating because it is straight out of the newspaper. After Aaron passes away, the Canaanite king of Arad hears that Israel is coming, and he comes and attacks and takes captives. Say the rabbis, this weren't no Canaanite. This was the king of the Amalekites, who was making believe he was a Canaanite by telling his people, excuse me, let's fool the Israelites. Let's make them think we're Canaanites. They'll pray to be saved from Canaanites, while we are really Amalekites, and then we will be victorious. And so he comes and he takes captives. Oh, that sounds way too familiar. But the question that's raised is, of course, what is this plot? He's going to have them speak the Canaanite language, and Israel is going to think they're Canaanites. But he didn't change their uniforms. He didn't change their mode of dress. They were dressing like Amalekites. As a theatrical person, the first thing that you notice are the costumes. If they're standing on the opposite side of a field, they're not going to hear what language they're speaking with each other, but they are going to see what they're wearing, and they're going to say, oh, those are Amalekites, because they're dressed like Amalekites. So what kind of a ruse is this? But I think that it's clear that this is an allegory and is teaching us a deeper thing, because I believe that garments represent deeds. These were the Amalekites in their deeds, in their intentions. Language, however, is public messaging. They adopted the messaging of the Canaanites, and their goal was to cause Israel to be divided, that we should again turn against each other and attack each other verbally. How so? Because what is the message of the Canaanites? Oh, the indigenous people, the Palestinians. This is our land. You have no right here, and certainly to come and to commit genocide. How can that be? So they were hoping that maybe some of the Bnei Israel might have a little guilty conscience, and they may start to say to each other, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, maybe we shouldn't be going there, maybe we shouldn't be fighting them, and divide and conquer. That was their goal, to weaken and destroy our resolve. But we were clear, we had no doubt that these were not beneficial, these were not friendly people. They had an evil plot. And as a result, what did Israel do? A new form of speech. They took an oath. They swore that if God will give this people into our hands, we will destroy their cities. Now, an oath, by the way, with a condition, has a rule, and the rule of conditions is that the positive must precede the negative. For example, Moses is going to make a deal with the tribes of Reuben and Gad about the territory to the east of the Jordan River, and he says, "If you will go and fight in front of your brothers, then you will get the land, but if not, then you can't." The positive always must be before the negative, and that is a metaphor for the way we must approach life and speak. We must always have a positive vision, and then the only time we have room for negative is if it's going to threaten the positive vision, not the other way around. So Bnei Israel, they took an oath, which is a commitment, not just an intention or a desire, it is a commitment to rid the world of this Amalekite or Canaanite or whatever menace it was. And the Torah is very careful to use the singular. Israel, singular, took an oath as if one person, because we were unified, we were not attacking each other, and we were together, and we were making a commitment. That is extremely powerful, and that is how Am Yisrael survived. One other thing, and we'll then apply it to our day and age. There's a mitzvah at the beginning of the parsha which does not involve speech, and that's a little bit surviving. It is the mitzvah of purification of the red heifer, done to give somebody who was defiled by contact with a dead body a chance to become pure once again. The purification does not have any spoken words, even though one would think that perhaps words of comfort are appropriate. This person was in contact with a dead person, whether they were a mourner or not. That is a depressing thing. Maybe we need to say something to lift their spirits, but no. There are times when actions are even more important, and the action here is very profound. Another Jew must sprinkle water that is called Mayim Chayim, the waters of life, which contain a zov, which is a low herb, and erez, the branch of a cedar tree, which is very high up, again, lifting it up directionally. This person must physically help the other person to lift up and once again regain their hope and their vision. And so as we enter a season of politics and elections, and in general we interface with the world, we must, as the song goes, accentuate the positive. Always have a positive vision rather than attacking and being against and against and against. And in an election, it tends to be that people say very harsh things about others. And to be honest, when I hear candidates spending all of their time telling us why the other guy is so terrible, that candidate in my book is the last one I want to vote for, because I want somebody who has a positive vision. And that's the way we must be. Always speaking about what can be, striving to rise up, and then the world becomes a very beautiful place. Shavua tov.